In 2021, hikers stumbled upon a grim scene in the woods outside a quiet American town. A pregnant teenager's body in a shallow grave. The victim was Monique Ellis. The killer turned out to be Clayton Marshall, the local sheriff, a man nearly 3 times her age. This case goes beyond a typical crime story. It reveals the consequences of unchecked authority and manipulation. As we explore the events leading to Monique's murder, we'll see how digital evidence became crucial in solving the case. We'll also witness a community's struggle to rebuild trust after an unimaginable betrayal by one of their own. Clayton Marshall commanded respect as the sheriff of Milbrook, a quiet community in the heart of America. During a routine school visit, he met Monique Ellis, a 17-year-old high school senior who expressed her dream of becoming a police officer. Clayton offered to mentor her, seeing an opportunity to shape a young mind. Their meetings began with Clayton sharing stories from his years on the force and offering advice on the police academy application process. However, as time passed, the lines between mentorship and something more sinister began to blur. Clayton's interest in Monique grew beyond professional boundaries. He started texting her late at night, asking about her personal life and relationships. When Monique mentioned a boy at school she liked, Clayton's tone shifted. He became possessive, warning her about the dangers of dating and suggesting she focus solely on her career goals. As summer approached, Clayton offered Monique a part-time job at the sheriff's office. Her parents agreed without hesitation, proud of their daughter's initiative. Behind closed doors, Clayton's behavior became increasingly inappropriate. He found excuses to be alone with Monique, his touches lingering longer than necessary. Monique struggled to make sense of the situation, convincing herself that his attention was a sign of his dedication to her future. One late night at the office, Clayton kissed her, making the full weight of his manipulation clear. The relationship spiraled quickly after that night. Clayton used his position of authority to control Monique's movements, monitoring her phone and insisting she report her whereabouts to him. He threatened to derail her career aspirations if she ever spoke about their special connection. As fall approached and Monique prepared to start her senior year, she made a devastating discovery. A home pregnancy test confirmed her worst fears. She was carrying Clayton's child. The news shattered her dreams and exposed the true nature of Clayton's so-called mentorship. With this revelation, Clayton Marshall's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. As Monique grappled with her options, the sheriff faced the terrifying prospect of his dark secret coming to light. The quiet town of Milbrook stood on the precipice of a scandal that would forever change the lives of everyone involved. As news of Clayton Marshall's affair with 17-year-old Monique Ellis spread through Milbrook, residents struggled to reconcile the sheriff's public image with his private actions. The community's initial disbelief gave way to a growing sense of betrayal and anger. Clayton's emergency press conference, where he denied wrongdoing and promised a full investigation, did little to quell the rising tide of suspicion. The impact on Monique's family was severe. Deputy James Ellis found himself caught between his loyalty to the department and his duty as a father. The strain on the Ellis family became increasingly apparent as they withdrew from public life to support Monique. As days passed, more details of Clayton's long-standing pattern of misconduct emerged. Former interns came forward with stories of inappropriate behavior, revealing that the sheriff had been abusing his position of authority for years. The community grappled with a painful realization. They had failed to recognize the predator in their midst. Trust in local law enforcement eroded rapidly. Residents who once felt safe under Clayton's watch, now viewed the entire department with suspicion. Calls for independent oversight and accountability grew louder, with community leaders demanding a complete overhaul of departmental policies. Milbrook found itself facing a new reality, one where their trusted protector had become a threat. As the town struggled to process the scandal, a collective sense of guilt began to set in. Residents questioned how they had allowed such abuse to occur unchecked for so long. Just as the community was beginning to confront these difficult questions, a shocking development pushed the investigation into even darker territory. Monique Ellis had vanished without a trace. Her disappearance would become the turning point in a case that was already tearing Milbrook apart, raising the stakes of the investigation to unimaginable heights. The hunt for Monique Ellis exposed the vulnerabilities of modern criminal investigations. As detectives pieced together Monique's final movements, they uncovered evidence that challenged their assumptions about the case and the man they had trusted to solve it. Monique's disappearance shocked Milbrook. Clayton Marshall, maintaining his innocence, took charge of the search efforts. He organized search parties, coordinated with neighboring counties, and made public pleas for information. To the community, he appeared as a dedicated sheriff, determined to find the missing teenager. However, Clayton's actions behind the scenes raised suspicions. He directed searches away from where Monique was last seen and dismissed potential leads that might implicate him. For days, the investigation stalled, with Clayton seemingly at the forefront of every effort. As time passed, some officers noticed inconsistencies in Clayton's statements. His timeline of events on the night of Monique's disappearance didn't align with other accounts. When questioned about these discrepancies, Clayton became defensive, blaming stress for his confusion. The investigation took a crucial turn when detectives examined digital evidence. GPS data from Monique's phone contradicted Clayton's version of events. Surveillance footage from a local gas station showed Clayton's truck with Monique inside at a time when he claimed to be at home. With suspicion now focused on Clayton, investigators intensified their efforts. They uncovered a pattern of communication between Clayton and Monique that suggested manipulation and control. This digital trail, combined with physical evidence like soil traces, matching the area where Monique was last seen found on Clayton's truck and boots, created a compelling case against the sheriff. The truth emerging was far darker than anyone in Milbrook had imagined. The man sworn to protect them was now the prime suspect in a case that had gripped the entire community. As investigators prepared to confront Clayton with their findings, the town braced itself for the shocking revelations that were about to come to light. On a crisp autumn morning, two local hikers ventured into the dense woods just beyond Milbrook's town limits. As they followed a barely visible trail, they noticed something unusual protruding from the ground. At first glance, it appeared to be discarded clothing, but as they approached, the grim reality became clear. Partially buried beneath leaves and dirt lay the body of a young woman. The hikers immediately called 911, and within minutes, the peaceful forest became a hive of activity. Police cordoned off the area as forensic teams carefully documented the scene. The body was soon identified as that of Monique Ellis, bringing a heartbreaking end to the search that had gripped Milbrook for weeks. The autopsy revealed a shocking truth. Not only had Monique been murdered, but she had been pregnant at the time of her death. This revelation added another layer of tragedy to the case, deepening the community's anguish. Investigators focused on analyzing soil samples, tracing tire tracks, and combing through phone records. Every piece of evidence seemed to point in one direction: Clayton Marshall. The community struggled to reconcile this information with the man they had trusted to keep them safe. As the case against Clayton solidified, investigators prepared for a final confrontation. They had built a compelling case, combining digital evidence with physical proof from the crime scene. The DNA results from the autopsy would be the final piece of evidence, definitively linking Clayton to both Monique and her unborn child. The quiet town of Milbrook now stood on the precipice of a dramatic showdown. The truth about Clayton Marshall was about to be exposed, and with it, the full extent of his betrayal. As investigators readied themselves to face the fallen sheriff, the community held its breath, bracing for the storm that was about to break. In the interrogation room, Clayton Marshall sat alone, his uniform now a stark reminder of his fallen status. As investigators pressed on, the weight of his crimes bore down upon him. The man who had sworn to uphold the law now faced the consequences of his own actions. Clayton's demeanor shifted as the interrogation progressed. His earlier bravado gave way to visible nervousness. Investigators presented him with new evidence they had uncovered, including surveillance footage from a gas station near the crime scene and cell phone records that contradicted his previous statements. Clayton's composure cracked further as he realized the extent of the case against him. The pressure on Clayton intensified with each passing hour. Investigators confronted him with forensic evidence, linking him directly to the crime scene. They presented a detailed timeline of events that left no room for his previous explanations. As the questioning continued, Clayton's resolve weakened. Outside the interrogation room, the impact of Clayton's actions reverberated through the community. The town of Milbrook struggled to come to terms with the betrayal of their trusted sheriff. Residents gathered outside the police station, their shock and anger palpable as they awaited news. Finally, faced with overwhelming evidence, Clayton broke down. In a moment of raw emotion, he confessed to the murder of Monique and their unborn child. He described how he had panicked when Monique threatened to reveal their relationship, leading to the fatal confrontation. The news of Clayton's confession spread rapidly through Milbrook. Residents watched in disbelief as their once respected sheriff was led away in handcuffs, his head bowed in shame. The sight marked the final fall of a man who had betrayed not only Monique, but an entire community that had placed its trust in him. As the town began to process the magnitude of Clayton's crimes, questions arose about how such abuse of power had gone unchecked for so long. The upcoming trial loomed as a watershed moment for Milbrook, a chance to confront this dark chapter and begin the long process of healing and rebuilding trust in their local law enforcement. The trial of Clayton Marshall became a national sensation, drawing intense media scrutiny. As the courthouse doors opened, a former sheriff faced judgment for his heinous crimes. The nation watched as Milbrook grappled with a disturbing truth. Sometimes, those sworn to protect become predators. Reporters captured every moment of the proceedings. The prosecution presented a damning case against Clayton, revealing how he had exploited his authority to prey on a young woman who trusted him. Each piece of evidence seemed to further implicate the former sheriff. Clayton's defense team attempted to portray him as a dedicated public servant who had made a grave mistake, arguing for leniency based on his years of service. Their efforts, however, seemed hollow against the overwhelming evidence. The most powerful moments of the trial came during the victim impact statements. Jerome and Denise Ellis, Monique's parents, took the stand to share their grief and anger. Jerome's voice shook as he recalled Clayton's false promises to find Monique. Denise spoke of her daughter's dreams, telling the court she wanted to make a difference. And instead, the man we trusted stole her future and buried it in the ground. As the prosecution rested its case, the weight of Clayton's crimes hung heavy in the courtroom. The jury retired to deliberate, leaving Milbrook to wait anxiously for their decision. Hours stretched into days as speculation about the outcome spread through the town. Finally, the jury returned with their verdict. The courtroom fell silent as the foreman stood. Clayton Marshall was found guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder and abuse of authority. The judge's sentencing was swift and severe. Clayton Marshall received life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge's words echoed through the courtroom. You betrayed a young woman who trusted you, and in a moment of selfishness and cowardice, you chose to end 2 lives to protect yourself. As Clayton was led away in handcuffs, Milbrook knew that while justice had been served, the healing process was only beginning. The trial had exposed deep wounds in the community that would take time and effort to mend. As residents left the courthouse, there was a sense that while this chapter had closed, the story of Milbrook's recovery was just starting to unfold. As Milbrook entered a new phase of recovery, the town's focus shifted from the initial shock to long-term healing. The Milbrook Accountability Committee, formed in the aftermath of the trial, worked tirelessly to implement reforms within the sheriff's office. Their efforts led to increased transparency, stricter vetting processes, and the establishment of a civilian oversight board to review complaints against officers. The Ellis family channeled their grief into action through the Monique Ellis Foundation. They traveled across the country, sharing their daughter's story to raise awareness about predatory behavior in positions of authority. The foundation's work extended beyond awareness, offering support to victims of abuse and collaborating with local schools to develop educational programs on recognizing manipulation and abuse of power. On the anniversary of Monique's disappearance, Milbrook residents gathered for a candlelight vigil. The somber event marked a turning point, transforming a day of sorrow into one of remembrance and hope. The creation of the Monique Ellis Memorial Scholarship further solidified the community's commitment to positive change, offering support to young women pursuing careers in law enforcement or victim advocacy. Signs of healing began to emerge as months passed. The relationship between the community and its law enforcement officers slowly mended. Residents started to view their officers not as potential threats, but as fellow citizens working to make amends for past transgressions. The process was uneven, marked by setbacks and moments of doubt, but the town pressed forward with determination. The impact of Clayton Marshall's crimes lingered, fostering a culture of accountability that extended beyond law enforcement. Milbrook residents now approached all forms of authority with a healthy skepticism, understanding that trust must be earned and vigilantly maintained. This newfound vigilance became a defining characteristic of the town, shaping its approach to governance and community relations. As Milbrook moved forward, it carried the weight of its painful history. The quiet town that had been rocked by unthinkable betrayal was finding its way, forever changed, but resolute in its commitment to building a safer, more transparent future for all its citizens. The healing process continued, a testament to the resilience of a community determined to learn from its past and protect its most vulnerable members. The aftermath of Clayton Marshall and Monique Ellis's case prompted significant changes in Milbrook. The town implemented stricter oversight measures for law enforcement, emphasizing transparency and community engagement. Monique's parents established the Monique Ellis Foundation, providing legal aid, counseling, and mentorship for survivors of abuse. Law enforcement experts now advocate for ongoing training, regular psychological evaluations, and clear reporting channels to prevent abuse of authority. The Milbrook case demonstrated that even carefully constructed deceptions will eventually unravel. The potential for abuse exists in any position of power. If you witness concerning behavior from authority figures, report your concerns to appropriate channels or seek support from organizations dedicated to accountability. Your voice could protect vulnerable individuals in your community and prevent future tragedies.